There we go. Welcome to episode 166, which is going to be a fun one because we're going to talk about what was it? TechEmpower, not lies. Lies, statistics, and something. We'll get to it. We have Franz, we have Holly, guest of the show. Franz is the performance guru. Holly is the ecosystem guru, and I'm just a guy who do this podcast sometimes. And I recently remember we have the news button. Where is it? Is that the right one? There we go. Yay! The news we actually have this week. We couldn't remember if we talked about it, so we'll just do it again. A few things next week. A bunch of us are actually going to be in Slovenia and talk about Quarkus. There's a whole day there. So if you are listening here and say hi to one of us, then do that. That'll be fun. And then there's a few other things that we haven't talked about. It's like if you're into stickers, there's actually on the Quarkus.io, you have this great artist called James Cobb who has done these stickers over the years, and it's kind of grown into this whole, rock. What's it called? Rock Hall of Fame of kind of thing. And a few weeks ago, he actually also did a whole bunch of desktop wallpapers. If people like, I guess it's a new thing because now people have the big screens. Now there actually is a need for wallpaper. So all these are here. So we'll put the links shortly in there. Thought we'll show those because we get asked from time to time how to get the different stickers and wallpapers we have. So cool. Otherwise, we've done releases as normal and chugging along. And Franz has a deadline, so we have to get started. And Asman, hey Asman, welcome too. And as always, just ask questions in the chat, and then we will disturb Franz, and he hopefully can answer the thing. So Franz, over to you.
Let's go. Yes. So this is a strange presentation because originally it was more angry and straight, let's say. But I've been kind of pushed back for good reason, because to drive the right message to the people. But I still try to be as angry as possible in the two part.
It's your New Year's resolution.
Yes, and it's very informal. No,
yeah.
But you shouldn't take take anything with a grain of salt as usual. So let's start. Is already shared? I can start.
Yes, let me 2 seconds. I will do that. There we go.
Okay, so even the subtitle is pretty straight. Nothing goes to waste. You don't have to waste things. So it's not going to be good by the end of the presentation for TechEmpower. That's the point. So who I am, the people probably knows. If they doesn't know, I have few titles. The only one that really cares are Forked Franz. If you really care about performance, you can follow me on Twitter, blah, blah, blah. And I work on Quarkus performance. So
yes,
that means a lot of things. That's it.
I just want to add, because you're not going to say it, that you don't just work on Quarkus performance. You work on performance pretty much of the whole Java ecosystem. You have PRs like everywhere fixing things. So everybody in the Java ecosystem is really benefiting from your work.
Because I'm a very annoying person. So I don't... That's the most... the main reason for that. But yes, thanks, Holly. So today I will try to yelling at cloud just a bit. I don't know how many people knows about TechEmpower. TechEmpower is a public benchmark. It's made of few parts and is comparing very different type of framework and application against different tests. The tests are run on a stable hardware. So the last time the hardware change was like 2 months ago, and it tends to be stable for few years. Is a very stable and noiseless kind of hardware, so it's pretty nice. The test itself is made of the part that you can read below. So there is a JSON serialization part, which you can use whatever you want to serialize in JSON. So it could be either Jackson or just an handmade and rolled kind of library, your choice. You have a single query, multiple queries, and data updates and fortune that are mostly database-oriented kind of tests. I'm saying database because given that we are talking about a very different language, framework, ecosystem, could be using Hibernate or any relational mapping, object relational mapping technologies, or could be straight direct with sending queries in binary to the database. It's up to you. But later on, we will see if there is a difference, apart from performance, between these different approaches. That is the devil in the details of this presentation.
And Franz, just to make sure, because I think maybe you missed saying a crucial word, like TechEmpower is a collection of tests, not just one test, right?
Yes.
And there's these different test types, which is the JSON serialization, single query, multiple queries, cast points, cast queries, sorry, etc. And each of those does let's say a well-defined task, but how you do it, you can do in multiple different ways.
Exactly.
Right?
And like any game, you have rules.
Yeah, you can.
Exactly.
And I think it's important to say that why is TechEmpower interesting is because generally, historically, what we've done in middleware or Red Hat is not to participate at least publicly in these TechEmpowers, because it always ends up in a funny game.
Yeah.
But TechEmpower, at least, let's just be positive, is a well-defined segment, and you can compare, you can see all the code and runs, and it's of it for comparison as a test benchmark. It's pretty good, I think.
Exactly. That would be one of the point I will talk about later on. But
you can compare across a much wider range of things, can't you, than with like a classic benchmark like SpecJDB or something where you're just sort of, it's really narrow what you can compare and you can't see other languages.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And indeed, one of the interesting point of this benchmark is a kind of micro benchmark in disguise. Because usually when you have SpecJ or any other, the application server or whatever it is made of different components. And these components are having different heterogeneous kind of load altogether, but in some deterministic way. Now, in this case, it's very different because the tests are performed one after the other, while keeping the application servers always on. That clearly for OpenJDK or whatever JVM-like machine, it's a kind of annoying because we are flexible, but at the same time, it means that the order of the test can make the performance difference on a specific test to behave differently if it's used in isolation or in the wrong sequence, let's say. But that's a different part. So just to give an idea what it is. And it's kind of important because it's public. You have a GitHub repo in which you can actually read the code of the people that are performing specific optimization. Maybe you would like to make use of them, not just for the benchmark, let's say. Indeed, for example, Microsoft is making use of this TechEmpower to track their performance over time for the core framework. So it's definitely a good micro benchmark, let's say. No, poorly executed. No, I'm joking. I will talk about it later. But
and Franz, we actually have before you do this, because you have this great question from Aspen said, I can see native Vertex fire now a Redtail and Vaporoid very fast. Is it true? I'm assuming he went to TechEmpower, saw the chart, and these are top. So it's true for this test. This is exactly why we want to do this presentation, is to
educate
people to learn what it is.
I would like the people that attend to this presentation to arrive by the end of the test and be able to read the scores. It seems a very simple thing, but actually it is not. Let's say it's simple, but it's well hidden under the cover of a poor user experience, for example. So let's talk about it later. So we are not the only one yelling at clouds against, let's say, TechEmpower. In this case, for example, this is a blog post of my friend Simone Bordet, that is one of the project lead of Jetty. So it works for WebTide. And this blog post explains the poor points, one of the few poor points of TechEmpower. For example, the fact that the request doesn't have any real information within them. So it means that the application server doesn't have much to parse. So if you make it very wrong, the HTTP parsing, who cares in theory? Then the responses are very trivial. So for example, the plain text and JSON response actually send a bunch of bytes. I wish to see that kind of things in customer cases. I tend to see 20 megabytes response flowing in the network. So very different scenario. Then the other poor point is that, for example, the JSON test is using a very low level of concurrency. That is weird because in the real world, or let's say now after so many years, we have many definitions of real worlds. In the real worlds of microservices, having a bunch of connection against a single server is pretty normal. But in the past, sometimes not. You have a big server with a lot of connections that are mostly idle because you got congested for some reason. And this kind of scenario are not at all considered by TechEmpower. Indeed, they have this JSON benchmark that has a fixed concurrency of 256 connection. That for microservices is wow, but for the other cases, really not. And the other two problem is that it ran for just 50 seconds, so very few, each part of the test, and they are using pipelining. I will talk more about pipelining in the next slide, but I see a few questions already. There are people that really need to know anything I can answer back. So
we can just take it. This is more depth questions. Like the Supendo says, talk about the startup time. There's a new Planck project takes 10 seconds for him, while Spring Boot takes less than 4. And he says there's some compile step. And I said to him, that sounds unheard. Like it's like less than a second or two for Planck projects. So depending follow, if you're using something like a dev service, that's going to add an overhead in dev mode, even if it's a blank project, because it takes the time to start up Postgres for that kind of thing. But of course, you might have found an issue. Open one with a blank project. You said it take 10 seconds, and let's definitely look at it.
I'd also add that, of course, dev mode is designed so that you almost never start the application in dev mode. Like you should be able to start the application in dev mode, and then maybe 3 days later, you restart it in dev mode for some reason. So it's supposed to be that you start it in dev mode and then it just stays up, which doesn't mean that the performance doesn't matter. But I'd also, if you're noticing that enough that it annoys you, you might be starting dev mode or restarting the application manually too often, which is something that I think a lot of people do. Like when I watch people use Quarkus, I'm like, why are you stopping it? Don't stop it. You don't need to stop it. But it's just a habit that we have from other frameworks.
So we have to, anyway, so when there's like open an issue with specifics, but it sounds very weird. I'm sure there's something else that's playing along, but happy to help. But anyway, that's build developer time performance. You're looking at runtime performance. So go ahead.
So we are not dealing with the startup performance, because what we didn't say about TechEmpower is that they care just about the peak throughput, literally the peak throughput. So if you have a 6 round of the same test in which you suck for the first 4, the 5th one with the highest score is taken. So they don't take in consideration variance, confidence, interval. They are nerd stuff. We don't care. So just take the highest score. That's what they do. Let's talk about pipeline. Why is that important? One of what I didn't tell you yet is that there are a few frameworks that are very committed, but not in all tests. So for example, Netty is the very core behind Vertex. They don't have a database. So why they should care about database kind of test? Indeed, they are still present in the results of TechEmpower, but they are just running the 2 tests that are not involving database, like JSON and the plain text scenario. That is the one blamed by the WebTide, the blog post, in which they say, but you just respond back an hello world string. that is exactly the case for plain text. So we are talking about that one. Pipelining is indeed related to the plain text scenario. That is the one in which you can get a lot of score. So you get a composite score made of all the score of all tests, but you can get very high in the score if you get even a single one super high, highest than everyone. And one of these tests is plain text, and is the one in which the people cheat the most. That's very important because, for example, there is this feature of HTTP called pipelining. Pipelining is a known feature, is a denial of service kind of service. So basically, instead of sending a request and awaiting a response, you send 1 megabyte of X packed request and then await straight in order all the responses. This kind of scenario is a kind of scenario that is prone to end-of-line blocking problem, for example, fairness. And actually, there are not a single browser that makes something like that. This kind of test doesn't exist in the real world. But the reason why is blamed in this other blog post, for example, that is still complaining about not using, they shouldn't use pipelining because pipelining is outside of what the real world really would use. I can still say that yes, but at the same time, if the pipelining stress what the application server perform in order to decode the requests that are coming in a huge flow, will make more important the way by which the HTTP parsing happen. And that's where the people tends to cheat. So let's go to the other slide. Just a small digression. Not just what they do. So pipelining is wrong, but even how they push the load is wrong. So they are not making use of a good load generator. There has been, 2 years ago, a very nice Quarkus insight made by John O'Hara, I think, so my mate, around the coordinated omission. So there are open issues on TechEmpower to make use of a better kind of load generator, for example. But these have been closed and no one has asked again. So they are still using a bad load generator. And as we said, nothing goes to waste. There is something good still. The pipelining part is something I already talked about. So pipelining is bad because it's not realistic, but at the same time, stress one of the core mechanisms of an application server, be able to correctly decode an HTTP request, and not just correctly, to be fast while doing it. Because the more requests you send straight in a row, the more you have chances that if you are fast, you get faster. So it magnified how bad you can perform or how good you can perform while performing this specific operation. So it's a micro benchmark, actually. And there are not just that part. The other good part that we already talked about is that there are many frameworks, even written in other languages, as comparison. So that part is nice. The other one is that the hardware is very stable. Something that we already talked about is a good thing for a test, for a benchmarking harness, to have an execution that always run on a stable hardware in which you don't have to care about it because the TechEmpower team is taking care of it. That is a very cool thing because it is no effort on my side and any framework maintainer. So thanks. And the other part is that given that is a micro benchmark in disguise, it tends to test a lot of very core mechanism singularly. It could be bad if you think about it as a wider spectrum kind of benchmark, which is not. But if you really understand that is a micro benchmark, okay, it's fine. It's still testing something that as a single feature is actually used. So HTTP decoding or I don't know, select all kind of queries that are not so nice, but that kind of stuff. But as I told you, that's where the details are. the devil in the details are. So, for example, I opened this issue because given that, as Holly already said, but I will tell it again, I'm really an annoying person. So it's open
I don't think I put it exactly like that.
No, but my brain gets a straight translation, so it's very precise. I'm annoying, but apart from that, no.
It's called you're persistent.
Persistent. That is, I would say my wife about it. But anyway, the important bit, I open an issue because I read almost all the framework code. I'm not joking. Hundreds of. I have a lot of time during the night. But the thing is that most of the top contender doesn't decode the request. So they are top notch. Just to answer the folk that was asking if Vertex and other red kale are so high. Why they are so high? Because they know the rules. The rules is that they are going to receive a specific kind of request.
So,
and they just
you didn't mean that Vertex did it.
No, Vertex is one of Vertex is doing it right, let's say. But others, a lot of others actually, that are the one that answer me on this issue, for example, saying, no, it's not cheating, there are shades of gray, but not really not. If you receive an HTTP request and you don't read what's in, it's a problem to me. Because in the real world, that is not what you will do. So what has happened is that many top contenders don't even decode the request, don't read the header.
Yeah.
And that will make them super fast,
Yeah. Yeah, and then it'd just be to because I remember first time you told me this, I was like, wait, what? And the issue here is that the test is deterministic, right? You know that these are all get and put requests. And therefore you can ignore like 80% of what's in the headers because it's not relevant for a test.
Yes.
And if you turn that off, then boom, you saved a lot of CPU time.
Exactly. And
especially in a high throughput scenario. Yes.
Not only because of pipelining, if you skip the decoding, you skip the most of your costs. So you will get super fast and network bound. So that's an interesting bit, because if you think about it, the very fuzzy HTTP 1.1 spec help in that, because, for example, there is a header called the connection, in which you can put the close or keep alive. For HTTP 2, there are very strict rules about this specific header, but in HTTP 1.1 is kind of up to you. I mean, it would be better if the client asks you to close. If you don't do it, okay. I mean, there is nothing really against the spec. So at the same time, it's not easy to enforce that everyone follow that rule. And it's very tied to the changes that the people perform on their framework in order to get faster on this specific benchmark. Because when a benchmark exists from long time and is open source, it's so easy to cheat it. And there are even more deeper detail that I would like to talk about. And I'm talking about Vertex as well. It's not cheating, but there are frameworks that by their own definition doesn't have to perform normal behavior that are required by higher level spec. For example, Quarkus is making use of a Jakarta spec or JAX RS, whatever is the name in modern times. But the point is that when you have an annotation that say what you accept, there is a thing called content negotiation. Content negotiation is something that say, okay, I'm going to accept just this type of thing. I'm going to produce just this type of things. If there is no match with what the client is requesting, you need to answer with a specific error. And that's what Jakarta and JAXA RS expect. But what it means, I told you that if you decode the header, if you don't decode the header, you go faster. But if you have to perform this comparison in a CPU-bound scenario, you are going to be slower. It seems a stupid thing, but it's a comparison among strings that got be decoded out of a bunch of bytes. It costs. So we are talking about that kind of cost. And for example, Vertex doesn't have to follow the Jakarta spec. So if you are looking at the Quarkus number by using restricted reactive, and you're looking at Vertex, the number definitely will look different because one perform more work on the other. It matters in the real life. Try to switch off pipelining. If you switch off pipelining, the amount of cost in decoding the HTTP request became very relatively little if compared to the I/O. And at that point, it won't matter that much. That's why I'm saying that it's a form of cheating. This one is not cheating. It's the actual natural behavior of each framework that follow different specs. And Quarkus has to use it. No? And now the elephant in the room. So this has been a very nice article, no pun intended. We are using it as an example of a poor user experience of TechEmpower. But let's dig into this more. So there has been this claim by making use of a screenshot of a TechEmpower UI. Please don't focus in the numbers yet, because as we say so far, I won't trust any number at this point if you don't know what the single framework are doing. What we can take out of it. Okay, let's say that if we really try hard to draw conclusion without knowing anything of what's going on, definitely we can draw any conclusion by any number, really. But I love to answer in public to this kind of articles. So I received these articles and I take a look of the actual Elidon implementation. The Elidon implementation for TechEmpower has a secret sauce. It's called the Vertex. Because for the database kind of scenario, they are using some mechanism to perform queries to the database. But these queries, these updates and insert require to be very efficient. And Vertex is one of the top-notch for the database-related kind of one. So it's the natural choice for that. But it's important. So when you look at the good number in that screenshot, you got to remember that the one related to the database depends where the most of the bottleneck is. So if they are achieving very good number with database, probably is because of the Vertex client, that it's great, because it's just a confirmation that we are doing a good job out of it. Please, Max.
And yeah, because I know you're not going to say this, but I remember when you showed me this screenshot with the numbers, and you were like, "This is lies," and you said, "Yeah, because the way they go faster than us." Because remember, for those who don't know, or maybe you starting to get it, is Francis very he likes to look at these numbers, understand what they do, and read the simpler code behind it to figure out why are we being beating in some scenarios, right? Which actually led to find an old bug in JDK about type systems, or type checking, which we now all benefit from. But that's the kind of details Francesco goes to. So when he saw the numbers, he was like, this cannot be true, because we know how these frameworks work. And we've designed Quarkus not to beat the framework. We designed Quarkus that we believe that, yes, people can get as fast as us, but they should not be faster if they are within the same kind of rule set. And that's where you came to me and said, hey, you know what? Like, the problem is they're actually beating us with Vertex, and Vertex is a key part of Quarkus. And we were like, what do you mean? And that's what you're saying is that, hey, these tests are using Vertex raw access to the database, whereas we are using, let's say, a full, complete, more enterprise comparable operation test. And so we were both doing it right, but the comparison is still
exactly
correct. Right? Yeah.
Indeed, that's why I don't want to look at yelling against other frameworks. It's not like that. The point is that if you compare apple to orange, definitely they will look different. They will taste different. Try it. So let's go deeper in this consideration. So why I say that, no pun intended, because really the real enemy here is the user experience of TechEmpower, because there is a very tiny, super small show filter or something like that, apply filter, super small, that no one touched it, actually, but I touched it. And when it happens, it opens a can of worms. So you have this huge grid of different toggle, and there are two two very important one. So I have a very poor visual for this slide because I should zoom in. But actually, there are two rows down there that say the classification of the framework to know if the approach is realistic or not. What does it mean? It's not easy to define a realistic. You got to look at the rules of TechEmpower. But the one that is definitely very clear is, are you using an object relational mapper? If it's not, you can't compare. Because if you click, and by accident I clicked it in order to show what other framework were performing tests with the norm, Micronaut is not there. Webflux is not there. Helidon is not there. So if we are talking about competitors, let's start with this one. You can't just pick the framework you want and say it's a framework comparison. It is not. It's a running test comparison. Okay, that's different. It's what they do. And then later on in what they do, if it's the same, you can compare about how they do it. That's very different. So, yeah.
I'll just say, because this is the question is like, so why did Quarkus do it this way? We actually had a multiple set of tests submitted in the early days, and we got the feedback from people, hey, this is confusing. Why is this faster than that one and this faster than that one? So we decided we were gonna run our own test on the, let's say, variants, but have them more like what we say the enterprise full app user experience and be fast in that area, that use case. And that worked fine for 2.5 years or so. But then, and this is what I'm pretty sure you're going to get to, Francis, then suddenly people started comparing our enterprise grade test with like fully optimized, skip normal, like don't use an ORM, don't use XYZ to get raw performance. And then you get raw performance, but of course you maybe get a worse developer experience and you have to cut out a lot of features. So yeah, anyway,
exactly.
I just want to give it. Yeah.
So this window kind of compare apple to apple, but beware, because this is the composite framework scores. And as I told you, the TechEmpower UI is really bad for user because, for example, Spring is there. And Spring seems fine. I mean, there are performance differences. I didn't look fully in their implementation, but I look close enough to know something. They're not making use of an object relational mapper. So the other problem, for example, is that they are not using it. Or better, the test that using it doesn't have that performance there. But in the composite score, they have that performance. How is possible? How the score is computed? I can tell you, it's bugged. So TechEmpower have a bug in the UI in which, given that you can submit a different flavor for your framework, for example, Spring can have the JDBC test, the Hibernate test, Vertex client, whatever test. Even if you filter to use to just show the test results with ORM, when you click on composite, the computation is not filtering based on your request. It's not making use of your filter. So you can still get in the highest number. It's weird, I know. But the point is that it's bugged, the UI. So no pun intended to Spring people, they make it right. They have different flavors, just the TechEmpower UI doesn't show the truth. Yeah. That's a problem.
And it's just to because we discussed this many times. The issue here is that we would say we made the mistake of only publish like what we call like end user relevant tests, where other frameworks publish all the tests. And then when you aggregate them, the way the TechEmpower scores, even though that we are faster in all the places where we'd say in matters for end users, we end up being punished because they have a lower score in some. Oh, sorry, we are still faster on individual tests, but the way TechEmpower summarizes it, things goes to flips.
Yes, they fall under the same hat. That is the higher level name of the framework, for example. Yes. But the other important bit is that why we remove them. It was confusing for user, but personally, I chosen to be one of the one to vote yes, remove it, because at that time I was working to improve the Quarkus overhead. So having so many data, I know myself. I will look into it if I got the data. So I prefer, given that was not needed at that time, let's drop it, because it doesn't give anything to user. It doesn't give anything to me but more work, and I'm already fine with what I got. So what has happened is that we remove it. And the maintainers of TechEmpower was very happy, because they needed to run all those tests we submit, right? So if you have a 6 flavor of your test, you make much longer the execution of the test for the other people. So the more you remove, the better it is for everyone, in theory. Now, what has happened, we will talk about it later on, why we reintroduce it.
And so we've got a question about this, which I think you've mostly just answered, but just to confirm. So, and I think another Asman says, I don't refer to the latest rounds data anymore. I look into the latest complete continuous benchmark. Is that a better reference, or does he still need to go through the source of the framework test cases?
Yes, still. The composite score is very misleading, even if you filter them. Because the problem is that even if maintainers are paying in order to be straight and very sincere about what the framework is doing, given that the UI is bugged, you risk to have a wrong composite score the same. So ideally, would be better to check in the test you care about. And in that case, the filter work, and the numbers represent all the flavor of your framework, so you can check what are the difference. But I will show a screenshot of it, so don't worry. Cool. Let's move. Why we care? We just say a lot of bad stuff about this benchmark. The reason why we care is that, like a broken clock, at least twice a day, it kind of work. And for us, it really worked out. So, for example, we found a incredible bad scalability benchmark, scalability problem of the JDK because of it. So TechEmpower was polluting a kind of the test because they didn't isolate the test. It's a bad practice, yes, but it makes us to find this. So in this regard, it has been good. And the other reason is why? HTTP 1.1 is old. It's older than me. No, it's not older than me. But the point is that it's an old kind of protocol. Why we care? Actually, the world still care about it. So if you look, that's why I say that I have a very poor visual for these slides. In very small, you can see the bars of how much new deployment of different protocol have traffic according to Cloudflare, probably. And in 2023, an HTTP 1.1 is more used than HTTP 3, actually. And is not probably more than half the HTTP 2. So the world still care. So why, even if it's a bad benchmark on an old protocol, okay, it's fine-ish. The world still care about it. And we haven't forgotten about HTTP 2, actually, because it's using gRPC, and we had tons of incredible improvement, real improvement, because even if HTTP 2 have a form that a way to perform pipelining is not pipelining, is multiplexing. So there is order, there is fairness. So unless you make it wrong or your application server, the fact that you can use less connection to drive more load is one of the features. It's not a bug in this case. It's not a denial of service kind of thing. It's a real one. And in this case, we had kind of 25% at minimum, because I love to show up the minimum improvement, because you can see that the peak one is even higher if compared across two different LTS versions of Quarkus. So we really are caring about the rest of the world, because it's not just TechEmpower. We are talking about the rest of the world. And you can see in the rightmost part of this chart that there is a 383 TechEmpower, because TechEmpower, as I told you, should be half trust, because you can tune your application in order to remove the most of the useless crap, even if it's still realistic enough. So if I tune very good Quarkus, that's the level of improvement that I can get out of our improvement in HTTP2. So by using the same settings I got for TechEmpower. So TechEmpower still is highly tuned to guarantee more performance, to squeeze more performance. But we talk about the TechEmpower UI. We have reintroduced the way by which Quarkus can make use of Vertex alone and Vertex with a tiny layer of other stuff and the Vertex client, and still be Quarkus, because actually people just wrote Quarkus code. What level of performance you can get? That's the level of performance. So, and here I'm not filtering, is the global chart. And in the global chart, we could go very high, like Vertex, because actually, if you drop layers, and Quarkus is made of Vertex, is not using Vertex, is Vertex. That's, quite a different. You can check what the level of performance you could achieve, but don't trust my word. Go to the actual single test. You can see the different flavors and draw your conclusion, but the right one. So don't trust that, given that the presence of Hibernate, that is the third one, the third row, is getting 40% of the performance of the top one. So Postgre, for example, is making use of PG client, Vertex client straight. You get twice the performance. Really, I won't use Hibernate anymore. That's the wrong way to think about it. It's not just about feature. It's about the test. It's a test execution. This test, Fortune, is a CPU bound, because they are using an incredibly fast database. So you are not limited by the database. And that means that what you do make the difference. If you don't perform any mapping, because you are performing twice the work, because you have to check, validate, execute, plan, optimize, in this specific case, clearly you get 40% performance. It's not because it's slower. In the real world, the optimization made by Hibernate with a complex query can squeeze more performance, because that time that is spent within the planner, within Hibernate, is something that you should do if you want to get that level of performance. That is quite a difference. So yes, take a look. Don't draw, wrong conclusion. This kind of test is more useful to us than you, because for us is a good way to understand the overhead in a very, very specific scenario. Is a micro benchmark. There is no way that a macro benchmark is so much exposed to user, and the user should just blindly trust on it. It doesn't work like that. So,
from France, just one back. So, just to the difference here is that we went and added these tests that we before didn't consider important to publish. So that's the Vertex and PostgreSQL. I think we believe we added. That means that when you now use the broken UI of TechEmpower, you get to compare apples to apples rather than a mix. Right? And then the version of what you said, like, be careful, don't go to conclusion, is these are tests for a specific use case. And it's most likely not the same you have in your data center or in your application. And we've always said, don't trust us, don't trust TechEmpower. Use it as a guideline, and we've now done what we could to make sure that the guideline is at least somewhat true. But always test on your own use case and your own production hardware. Yeah.
And we've got a really good question coming in like that, because I would completely reiterate that advice. You have to test for what matters to you. But of course, we all have too much to do, and we all have too much cognitive load, and we don't have enough time. So is there something that we can be doing? So Asman asks, do we have an alternative benchmark platform to TechEmpower? And like Gunnar's billion row challenge, is there something that would at least get you closer to a universal truth?
So
without
before
you having to do it yourself.
I will give Frank because I know he has more than I can. I just say here, Gunner's is not a good comparison of which framework you're using.
Yeah.
It's a good comparison about who has the most time to tweak out the most detail of a Java VM in January months because they just had Christmas. Right? That's the
yes.
I think Gunner was amazing and revealed a ton of stuff and educated people a lot. Do not use that as a measurement of the framework for enterprise application.
Yeah.
And two, TechEmpower is not a bad benchmark. There's a reason why we've used it from the beginning, and I think Franz even said words like good and helpful and useful. What we are want to explain and why we've been hesitant on doing this is that we felt like if we published data like test that we felt was not correct, like you can take Gunner's one BRC as the Vertex Postgres one. It's like a very low level, go direct to the metal. You can always outperform almost anything. But realistically, we that's not what you would do, except for very specific cases. So anyway, my point is that TechEmpower is actually a good place to go. And when France and others helped add these things in, the comparison got better. Right? We just want everyone to kind of understand and be educated that please be aware that these tests understand what they do, and there is a bug in the UI of TechEmpower that makes it like, yeah, we fell into that trap basically. So you want to undo that trap. So anyway, I'm just saying TechEmpower is a good one to go look for, but the best test is yours. So anyway, France, is the order?
Yes. No, it's definitely, I mean, I have just one more slide, but the point is that it's like when you have to buy something from Amazon, you can trust the score produced on, on the internet, whatever it is. But usually when you have your chance to try it is where you can find your reason to really buy it. It's not always like that, because the point is that we can build a network of trusted opinion. But given that we are talking about numbers, opinion doesn't work well. No. So the point is that you can just go past the let's trust what is being published. It's a benchmark. Shouldn't be trust from the beginning because it's a game. Yeah. And the game is made of competitor that just try to squeeze the most out of it. And that's important. Even the settings that could be used are making use of very deep technical knowledge on how to squeeze the most of that specific hardware. That's not your hardware. And that's already make a lot of difference, not just the use case. And last, it seems completely unrelated. It really is not. So the reason why I have introduced the new flavor is because we need something to compare across the different overhead layers of Quarkus. So sorry, I didn't make it for you. I make it for me, that PR. That's important. For me, I mean, the whole Quarkus team, we needed something like that. And I know it's exposed in public. That's the reason of the Quarkus Insight. I would like the people to know what and why we have done what we have done. But this specific post is very interesting because if you look at that article, it shows what you lose and what you get by removing the magic layers of Quarkus. Is not any different. So any benchmark can get better numbers. The more you are, you decide to make it poor in the experience. And it is what it is. Raw performance is performed by raw framework. Raw libraries. It is what it is for that kind of test, because let's remember, it's a micro benchmark in disguise. Okay, and I would say that's all. So if more people got more questions, it's done. Well, I was less angry than the other times.
No, yeah. We don't have any on the chat, but we have a few minutes before you have to jump here. But yeah, I'll say this is like just to you said it but I'll just reiterate it. Like the TechEmpower has been really useful for us to find out, like, hey, why are we suddenly slower? Or it's a kind of different test than the one we run ourselves, and it's been an enabler for us to get faster and faster, and also be an indicator of like, hey, why is this framework suddenly faster than us? And then we go look, and in most often cases, it's as you said, like, oh, they stopped parsing the headers, or they use a technique that we didn't use yet, and we're like, oh, we actually have that already implemented. It just haven't run in the round of TechEmpower. Because another thing you didn't talk about is like, there's a certain schedule, and if you don't hit it, then for a month or two, you will look as your worse, even that your newest number is better, right? So it's always a moment in time, and it's skewed to whoever got it in. That's like a good question here. Like he says, Quarkus and TechEmpower is only based on JVM runs, not native image. Is that correct? Or
yes, and I can tell you already the numbers without even having the numbers. That is a strange guess for a performance engineer to do this kind of wild guesses. Native image in the current form for CPU-bound scenario, generally speaking, achieve half of the performance of JVM. And there are good reasons for that, very technical, but maybe in another Quarkus inside.
Yeah, I might just give it a hint, because then we're like, hey, we should never use native image. And I'm going to take a guess on the difference is that, well, the startup will be better for native image, but the throughput on a full run JVM wins because of the JIT, and it can recompile based on the use case, right? That's the scenario that you are meant to, right? So yeah, and so Asman, long name I can't pronounce, we've always recommended it, if your application is for high throughput for a longer period of time, JVM mode will almost always win. If you're more like a serverless thing or startup, or the image size is important for you, native image is what you do. And TechEmpower does not test those things. So it makes no sense for us to submit native image in there. Kevin. Kevin loves us. Because, why does Quarkus benchmark not use virtual threads as held on NEMA?
Two reasons, actually. So currently we are using an image based on JDK 17. That's the very first reason, for example, because stable-ish virtual thread are on 21, for example. And the most of our users are not on 21. So I decided to pick a version that I kind of care yet. But given that the ticks of the JVM version are so quicker now, probably we will update it. We do have internal tests in our labs that are using virtual threads, and there are parts of virtual threads that still misbehave with the existing ecosystem. And beware, Eldon NEMA is not using virtual thread to perform the query, is using Vertex client. So they ask Vertex client to perform the query, and they await in a virtual threads. The devil is in the details.
Yeah, and I want to repeat that one, because again, when you told me that one, I was like, wait, yeah. So Kevin, this is the thing. Like, Hell and NEMA is based; their core is based on virtual threads, but to beat us and others in the TechEmpower in the past, they had to fall back to use reactive, what is considered reaction programming, to get the results they wanted to. If they had stayed on and used normal JWC or Hibernate or M, they would have hit the issues that the drivers would not reliably work there. The case might have changed now, but this is the thing, right? That Quarkus, in all the tests that we published, we have been, let's say, being clean in the sense that when we say reactive, we use reactive. When we use the enterprise one, we use Java 17 non-virtual threads. That's just threads. And we used Vertex as the engine inside Quarkus. Right? So yeah, and again, this is that's I forgot that little detail that Vertex. Hilden actually said they were faster because of virtual threads, which they are. The parts they did was because they re-implemented virtual threads. But then the part that actually matters for enterprise app, like the querying and database, was not using virtual threads.
Exactly. But it's important to give to what is due. As I told you, I read the most of our competitor framework. I would say as good as the developer itself. One thing that I love about Halid and Lima is that they have a very nice HTTP parser. Super nice, both from the point of the implementation and the performance detail. And I gave a lot of cheers to the lead of Elidon about it when we meet in Flash. And that's why they have a very good performance in plain text. And JSON, not that much, but is not their fault. But for plain text, they have a very good performance because it's a very good implemented stack. Given that it's a CPU bound, if it's good implemented, they will go fast. So it is what it is.
Yeah. I know you have to jump for a call, and it's just the last one here from Jan. It says, test performed Java 17 and 21, and you said
now 17.
17, yes. What do you think will happen if they just don't want a thing you change with Java 21?
I think it won't happen that much, but I have to double check with the Netty. Because Netty, that is the very core of Quarkus, is based on few optimization that require to reflexively access a specific version, JVM platform version methods. So if they disappear for 21 and we don't know, we will get slower. So I have to perform some tests in our lab first.
Sure. That was a real performance thing there in answer. Not
depends.
Depends. Cool. I know you have to jump, Franz. Super thanks for doing it. And I think this was really useful and helpful. Did we actually publish a blog about this yet, or is that coming?
No, not yet, because I fear legals. No, I'm just
don't say that. That's fine. It's all good.
The voice just disappear in the wind. That's
and I just want to highlight here, we are not trying to we want to be as transparent and open about what we've done and what we've seen and experienced, and we think all the frameworks are doing awesome, and we love the competition. We just felt that this glitch in the TechEmpower UI was a bit too big to go unnoticed. Yeah. So this is more for education, not for any. And that's why Franz is mad of why do I have to educate on this? This is a bug. This is not. You just fixed the bug, but it's still there for a long time now. So yeah, cool. Thank you all, and see you next week.